He had, supposedly, on the outside of his house was his presidential guards protecting him. On the inside of his house were these Blackwater white mercenaries that he had hired. Where were they that night? I want to give you guys one anecdote. In 2004, when the United States did a coup d'etat against President Aristide, President Aristide too had these white security guards, and I remember interviewing one of them after the coup d'etat had happened. I said, "Where were you?" He said that they were told by the U.S. to stand down, and threatened that if they did not
oh boy, we didn't know, did you? You didn't know. But this is what is happening in South Africa, and the conversation must be had. And we're going to say in this space, for the record, you know, one of the reasons that I have not been to South Africa yet, even after apartheid, and I refuse to go there, has to do with all that you heard here this morning. And the other thing, in recent times, despite many invitations, I've refused to go, and I will not go as long as Cyril Ramaphosa is president. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African. And just quickly before I go to the phone lines to speak with my very special guest on the line, just to let you know, you might have heard overnight that Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, that his party has registered a landslide victory in the elections there in Ethiopia. We'll talk about that shortly in the program. Now, sister is very angry with me on the phone lines. She's written to say that I should never say that I'm not going to South Africa as long as Cyril Ramaphosa is president. Well, I've said what I've said, right? And I know, sister, that you're angry, but let us listen to each other closely. I have made the decision, and it's a decision that I'm only communicating now, but I made it a long time. I will not visit South Africa as long as the most corrupt of them all, Cyril Ramaphosa, is president. And I see the Jamaican government cozying up with Cyril Ramaphosa. And I'd just like to make one thing clear. We have to call out corruption wherever it is. And we have to call out oppression wherever we see it and wherever it is. And this is what is happening in South Africa. Democratic apartheid. Under Cyril Ramaphosa, before him, under Zuma. Before him, under Mbeki. Before him, under Mandela. It is what it is, and I only deal with the isness of things. All right, I'm going to leave it there. All right, we're going to the phone lines to speak with my very special guest, who my sister is going to come talk to us now about what's happening in IT. Our sister Èzili Dantor is an award-winning playwright, a performance poet, political and social commentator. She's an author. She's a human rights attorney at law. She is a founder and president of the ITAN Lawyers Leadership Network. She's also founder and director of Free Haiti Now movement. She is the most prolific international writer and advocate for IT, and is internationally known as the foremost legal analyst and commentator writer of the untold counter-colonial narrative on IT. She was born in Port-au-Prince and served in Stamford, Connecticut. She holds a BA from Boston College and attended the University of Connecticut School of Law. She's author of 3 plays, a spoken word and a jazz CD, and 2 books of poetry, and has received numerous awards for her art, activism, and civic contributions. Welcome to the space, my sister Èzili Dantor. Good morning, Èzili. Thank you so much for joining us on the Africa Forum this morning.
Thank you for having me. Honor and respect to all your listeners.
My sister, a lot happening, of course, around us, and the information or data coming left, right, and center regarding the assassination in CARICOM waters of a member of CARICOM. I have said before in this space that we're walking a thin line. We're not praising Jovenel Moise, the president who was assassinated. But despite his failure, despite his lack of intent to improve the conditions of the black masses of Haiti. That what has happened in Haiti should not happen anywhere, whether it's Haiti or anywhere within the Caribbean waters, the CARICOM waters. So I'm making that disclaimer so people understand where we're going. Can you talk to us, and we're going to go to the history of Haiti in a little while, but can you talk to us about what, from your own perspective, led to this moment that Haiti is now facing?
Well, Jovenel Moise, according to the Haitian Constitution, his term ended, and according to many of Haiti's constitutional lawyers and even Harvard and other schools of law, his term had ended on February 7th, 2021. But however, the international community is really who is running Haiti. So he claimed that he had another year to go, and so the United States essentially backed him up on that. So he's been disputed since then, since February 2021. So he's been a controversial figure for a long time. His whole political party have been called legal bandits. And, the Haitian people have been trying to peacefully get him out of office because they did not feel that, they put him in office. They felt that the international community put him in office. Mm-hmm. So, and it's very, very, they have been proven to be right because the assassins that came to kill him certainly weren't, the Haitian people do not have money to be hiring mercenaries. Mm-hmm. But what we wrote is that the assassins who came to kill him, allegedly, we have the video of them when they got to the gate of his house. They said, this is the DEA. This is a DEA operation. And there was not one shot by the Presidential Guard. They all put their guns down and allowed assassins into his house. This is what the Haitian people have been saying. Mm-hmm. The international community, you are putting a man who was indicted for drug money laundering as our president. Mm-hmm. We didn't put him in office. You put him in office. And now what they're telling us is that people came to assassinate him, and all they had to say was DEA, and the Presidential Guards put down their guns, mm-hmm. and the assassins went inside and executed him in the most horrible of manner. Mm-hmm. The Haitian people believe that this was an inside job by his own co-host, and they're watching now as the interim prime minister that he has declared himself as the provisional president of IHC to run IHC until there's elections. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so essentially what we at Free Haiti, what we see based on what we see happening is that the international community who put Jovenel in office, and the black opportunist in his party, this was an inside job, and it couldn't have been done without U.S. and the core group sanction. And looking at the situation, because yes, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I must commend you for, and I don't even know how you're able to maintain your voice, because I know that you have been doing interviews up and down the globe, and that you're also doing your live social media programs. So that, but I noted last night, and I was in that session where you put on your attorney at law cap, literally. And I want you to do that for us today, if you don't mind, because when I saw that, I thought, wow, that one of the things that you did, you asked, who are these suspects? And you literally named them and say why they are suspects in this particular crime. And I would want you, there are a handful of them, I think 5 to 7. And I want you to walk us through that. So the question is, you talk about the international community, but who are the suspects in this?
Okay, so, for every crime, someone has to have a motive.
Yes.
What we see in playing out in front of us is the Haitian police and the presidential guards and all of these authorities who could not do a thing to protect this de facto president who had become a dictator because he was ruling by decree since January 2020 without parliament. He dissolved parliament. They could not protect him, but they want us to believe that within 24 hours, they had surrounded the mercenaries who apparently were smart enough to get into his house and kill him, but not smart enough to have an exit plan to get out of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
They were still there, and they're telling us that they were Colombians, and 28 people supposedly are suspected, and they have, 26 in custody. They've killed a few, and there's a couple of U.S. citizens involved. So they're telling us these things. Mm-hmm. But we know for every crime, there's got to be someone had to have hired. Let's say these Colombians were in fact the mercenaries that pulled the trigger. The question is, who hired them? Mm-hmm. And so we say, who benefited from this? It certainly is not the Haitian people. The Haitian people have been peacefully asking for this man to not be in office, and for Haiti to have a provisional government, and to heal from all of this, what we call the legal bandits. Legally, the United States, France, Canada, because there's a group of foreign international they call themselves the core group. Mm-hmm. They actually are the legal advisors to Jovenel Moise. Mm-hmm. And these countries are made up of the United States, with Michel Sisson, the United States ambassador, mm-hmm. France, Canada, Germany, Brazil, Spain, and then they have the OAS, the UN, and the European Union. Mm-hmm. So these are the core group. And
so the oppressors of all come to the table in Little Haiti. Isn't this interesting? Because you've just named out the enslavers. They are meeting in one place in Haiti, and they have called themselves they're called the core group. You say, meaning that what's their responsibility? I mean, who are they?
Yeah, well, they exactly, but they're the ones that. I'll give you an example of how the core group is ruling Haiti, right? So, who was the first beneficiary of this death? Jovenel, his interim, and all of these people are illegal because a prime minister has to be sanctioned by the parliament, but he dissolves parliament, right? Mm-hmm. And according to the Constitution, when there is a vacancy in office, the Supreme Court justice is the one that takes over. But he fired the Supreme Court illegally, because you can't fire justices. They're put in for a term of life, mm-hmm. 10 years for Haiti, right? Mm-hmm. So he fired all these legal people, right? And the United States and the core group still saying to the Haitian people that it's okay. Mm-hmm. So here we have right now in Haiti a man named Claude Joseph, first person, right? He was the interim prime minister under Jovenel when he was alive. But Jovenel had, obviously unilaterally, because he was running Haiti by himself, mm-hmm. he had named someone else as prime minister, and mm-hmm. that someone else, his name is Ariel Henry. Remember, the Haitian people got nothing to do with what he's doing. There is no parliament. Right. So this guy, Claude Joseph, who is now telling everyone that he is the provisional president of Haiti, was supposed to be, not supposed to be, he had put in his resignation. His patron, Jovenel Moise, had essentially asked for his resignation and got his resignation. and named a new interim prime minister who was Ariel Henry. But here we are now, the day, and he was supposed to leave office, this guy, Claude Joseph, the day that the president died.
Yes.
But as soon as the president died, this guy was all over the media saying he has everything in order. There's going to be a state of siege, martial law, and that, and so he's been the one that's been in office. And then, while we were just catching our breath from this execution, the core group announced that, the next day, Ariel Henry, who the day of the assassination went into hiding, he came out of hiding and he said, no, Claude Joseph is not the prime minister. I'm the prime minister because I was named by the president and my term was supposed to start today. Right?
Yes.
So we're watching this as we have apparently no horse in this race, right?
Of course, yes.
No say. All right? And so guess who now decides which of these two are actually prime minister? The core group.
All right. The enslavers.
By whose authority? Well, there is the UN who now has an office right at, the prime minister's space. This is the mission. It's called BNU, and it's headed by a woman who has a very checkered past. She was the head of AFRICOM, right? She is used to being a colonist. Her name is Ellen Lalume. And Ellen Lalume essentially said, between these two people, that the international community recognized Claude Joseph as the prime minister of Haiti and now the provisional head of Haiti until there's election.
Okay.
So we've got nothing to say. So that's why we're saying, hey, listen, this was very quick. How did the international community get to decide who's prime minister, and how were they involved in this plot? So, and now one more person walks into this issue, and his name is Joseph Lambert. He is claiming to be the rightful prime minister, and they're all using a constitution that no Haitian recognizes. I don't recognize it, right? So in 2012, the Haitian constitution was allegedly changed by Michel Martelly, also put in a illegal election, right? By Obama and Biden.
We remember that.
Michel Martelly, Michel Martelly is the one that chose his successor, which is Jovenel Moise.
Exactly. We recall that, yes.
So now I've named at least 4 people, right?
Yes.
Claude Joseph, the interim prime minister, Ariel Henry, and then I'm going to tell you why Joseph Lambert, who is now claiming he's the real prime minister, and then you have Martelly. Let's finish with Joseph Lambert. So Joseph Lambert, he is claiming his tenuous hold as prime minister because he says that before Jovenel dissolved Parliament, now this guy, we have not heard from any Parliament members. Jovenel has been running the country with the core group by himself since January 2020. Now, to the coup, all of a sudden, so the way he dissolved Parliament was that he said, using the 1987 Constitution, that none of them are using right now, Jovenel used the 1987 Constitution to essentially say that the term of office of, 2/3 of the Parliament was gone, so now there was only 10 left. But those 10 didn't have a quorum, so they were effectively, never sitting. But one of the senators, it was Joseph Lambert, and he was the president of the Senate that dissolved and hasn't been operating. But all of a sudden, he now tells us that he is the prime minister because according to the amended constitution, not the 1987 constitution, which Haitians recognized, but the amended Constitution, that the successor, when there's a vacancy, is the Prime Minister. And if the Prime Minister is not available, the next successor is the head of the Senate.
So that
he said he was the head of the Senate, so he's the rightful heir to being provisional president right now until there's election.
So that in his very coming forth, he identifies himself as a suspect.
That's right. Okay? Now, why is Martelly also, may have some motive, right? So Michel Martelly, this was a person that he put in office that no one knew until 2015. Jovenel Moise had no political reputation. He was never on the political stage. Michel Martelly just took him and brought him in and said, "This is my successor." And then the core group substantiated that, and he became president through a very contested election. And I say contested because Haitians were like, "Who is this guy?" Out of 13 million people, they tell us that he won by 500,000 votes. They tell us that they just tell us what to do. And guess what? When Haitians protested that this guy did not win no election, they send the international community again to come in. They send the OAS. And the OAS came into Haiti and said, "Oh, these were good elections, and he is the president." Haitian people have been on the streets. This guy's the most contested, just like Martelly, right? Since he, started office, right? So now we have Martelly, who had his placeholder, right?
Yes.
But Martelly, when he was president, had a sort of powerful prime minister. His name is Laurent Lamotte. So you guys that's another person, right? Laurent Lamotte has been all over Africa. He's done a lot of things in terms of work. There's dossiers on him for fraud in different countries. He's the one people believe. Anyways, him and Martelly got into some sort of a fallout. So he was Martelly's prime minister when Martelly was in office. At some point, Martelly fired him, and he's never forgiven Martelly for that. So he's been on the other side, planning his comeback as a presidential candidate.
Yes.
Well, a couple of days before Jovenel Moise was executed, we saw Jovenel with Laurent Lamotte, Martelly's primary competitor, in Turkey.
Oh, Turkey.
In Turkey. Some people say that Jovenel Moise had been killing Haitians, I'm going to give you some of the things that he did by decree. I'll name them.
Yes.
That the international community never denounced. But this trip to Turkey, I think, may have sealed his fate with the international community.
So Moise actually went in. This is Moise. Sorry, this is Moise we are talking about, who went into Turkey?
Yes.
Right.
He took a trip to Turkey, and apparently, I don't have the paperwork to prove it, but apparently it was reported in the news that he signed some sort of agreement for aid, for IET, with Turkey. And as you know, the United States is not going to like that.
No, they're not friends with Erdogan. Right? I mean, Erdogan is the enemy of the U.S. Yes.
And so Laurent Lamotte, and then he did something else that might have, sealed his fate with Martelly, because Martelly is like, I put you in office so that, then I could then come back, because the Haitian Constitution doesn't allow consecutive terms. So that was because, we had Duvalier and dictatorship. The way the Constitution worked is that you can be president for 5 years, and then you can't come back and run until not consecutively, right? So this was Mateli's placeholder, and all of a sudden Mateli's placeholder is buddy-buddy with Mateli's competitor. They hated each other, right?
Yes.
And they're in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Right? Okay, now, another thing that Jovenel did to show that he has a fallout with Mateli, one of the ways these corrupt men are kept from running for office is that they have to have something called a discharge. Mm-hmm. So when Mateli was in office, before he left office, he had whenever they get into trouble and the people are protesting all of their graft and corruption. Remember, there was a big case where $4 billion went missing from the Petro Caribe fund, which is the Venezuelan fund for oil, and that was under Mateli and Lamotte. So all these people had dossiers and they don't have discharges. Mm-hmm. Well, by decree, Mateli definitely didn't want Laurent Lamotte to have a discharge. If he has a discharge, which essentially says that he did not have any graft in office and he can now run for any office he wants again. Mm-hmm. Well, Jovenel Moise gave a discharge to Laurent Lamotte. That wouldn't have pleased Mateli. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm just giving you all these things so you guys can see why they might have motive, right?
Yes.
So we've talked about the two prime ministers, and then we have Joseph Lambert, who says, as head of the Senate, even though it was dissolved and we hadn't heard from these people since January 2020, now he's prime minister, and then we have Mateli, who, and Mateli, of course, was in America during the time of this. And then we have Laurent Lamotte. And then who else do we have? We have, there is a Syrian. Yes. Boulos, right? Mm-hmm. So, with regards to how neocolonialism works in Haiti, there's the international community who decides who's going to be president. Now, everybody knows I represented the first democratically elected president in Haiti years ago. And it was the international community that essentially gave him 2 coups d'etats, right?
Mm-hmm. And our listeners should know that. Our listeners should know that because we didn't have that up at front, that you are the attorney at law who represented Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And that our listeners should know who you are in that regard. Well, my sister, can you hold the line for me? Let me just take a quick break to come back to Boulos, all right? With you inside of the Africa Forum, it is Running Africa, and my very special guest on the line, my sister, attorney at law, activist, Pan-African, Haitian. She, the lawyer who represented Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and we're talking about the assassination of the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise. What she's doing is putting on her legal hat, and she's taking us through who might have had motive to assassinate the president. These are questions that we've been asking, and we're also asking why as we go along. So she's joining us on the phone line to continue that discussion. My sister, you brought us to a few, and so the next person with motive to assassinate Moise, you said, was Boulos. Boulos?
Right. Now, normally, the Haitian president, Caribbean, and they're normally very used to getting contracts, 25-year contracts, participating in, we call them the mafia families, right? These are Syrian, Lebanese, and Jewish. So then the top ones are Biggio, Merv, and then there's others like Boulos, okay? So Boulos was in Miami for the, doing the on July 7th. Why? Because Jovenel, by decree, had put out an arrest warrant for him, and he's one of the oligarchs. So he probably is not very happy with Jovenel. Why? Because he is part of the opposition someone who wants to run for president. He ran for president before.
Yes.
And there was the concern is Jovenel Moise fell out with this man who was one of his patrons, who put money into making sure that he was president. Like all of the other Syrians, they're the ones that put these guys in office, but they're not the ones that would, for instance, help the masses have a representative. They work for the international community to put in overseers. So Boulos had helped put Jovenel in office, and all of a sudden Jovenel and Boulos had a fallout, and Jovenel put a arrest warrant for Boulos. And so we learned very recently that Boulos had hired lobbyists in America to essentially say that Joseph Lambert should be the president. To essentially say that there should be a election should go on, and of course he was going to run.
And what's interesting about this is that I'm sorry to interrupt, but what's interesting about this, so our listeners understand, is that Politico is reporting that he actually hired these lobbyists 2 days before the assassination. Exactly. And there was a arrest warrant for him. And the international community, of course, I don't know, if there's an arrest warrant for you, and you're running to the United States to put together lobbyists, listen, right? Nothing that these people are doing is innocent. Right. So that's okay. So that's why we say, what's going on? What is the charge? The charge that he is charged with taking monies, millions of dollars of Haitian money that he was supposed to use for acts that he never used it for, and that's why the arrest warrant for the monies that was taken. And then all of a sudden, he can go to Washington, hire lobbyists, and essentially say, here's the person that should be the president, and there should be a transitional president, a transition. And then he chose, of course, the Haitian people don't have a horse in this game. He chose Joseph Lambert. Now, listen, Joseph Lambert is a deported drug dealer. Oh my God! Wow. Okay, and he was the president of the Senate. I said a long time ago that I remember when Trump was in office, and we were trying to get Trump not to recognize Moise because Moise hadn't been sworn in to his illegal office until Trump came into office. Moise was put into office by Biden and Obama, but he wasn't sworn in until February. So at that time, there was a new American administration. We were doing all that we could to say to Trump, do not continue the policy of the Bidens, and because this guy, all these people have cases, and the United States can just call them up and say, if you don't do what we say, you're going to end up in Miami on a drug charge. And we said, our sovereignty is being destroyed here by these people who are corrupt. So that kind of leverage that the United States... Nobody listened to us, okay? Nobody listened to us. So today you have Boulos with a man who also has a dossier. Well, we're going to go down the same road again? If this guy does become prime minister in provisional government and the United States don't like what he does, they're just going to send some suspect people to say DEA, and we go back again to this? So that's... Okay, but there's one more person I want to add. Yes. Let me see. His name. Well, three more people. Right. There is Dimitri. During the time of Jovenel Moise. Okay, he's had many prime ministers. We don't have anything to do with this. Yes. And his name was Henri Seillant. Now, you guys might remember, because I don't know if I did any interviews at that time, but sometime in February 2019, one of the things that the Haitian people have been saying is that when they go into the street and try to peacefully protest, Jovenel Moise hired
white, kind of Blackwater mercenaries to come and be his security guards, paying him millions and millions of dollars, and to intimidate the innocent, unarmed protesters. And so, you know, I've had cases of members of the Haitian Lawyers Leadership who are in the streets walking, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody falls, and we don't know where the shot came, and they got a headshot, and they're dead.
And you yourself, and I don't understand, there have been assassination attempts on your own life.
Many times. I'm here by the grace of the ancestors. Yes. It's something I don't talk about because, as I said, you know, it's very difficult what we're doing. Haitian people have been fighting for a long time, and we pay the price for being the first to put liberty into application, and it is the price. And, you know, my parents did this, and my grandparents did this. It's a fight.
Ancestral guidance, my sister.
Die in this fight, but it is what it is.
Ancestral guidance.
From one generation to the other. So essentially, these mercenaries, these white mercenaries, back in February of 2019, there was a group of white mercenaries that were arrested in Haiti. And they really did look like mercenaries, not these little guys that don't even seem like they have muscles. They were real American former military.
We remember that. Yes.
You remember that, okay? Well, at that time, there was a prime minister with Jovenel, and his name was Henri Seillant. Henri Seillant also happens to be the lawyer for Boulos, okay?
Yes.
And he is implicated in the money laundering scheme that caused the arrest warrant for Boulos. Okay? So obviously Jovenel is not his best friend, because remember, back in those days, Henri Seillant went on CNN and he said that the mercenaries had come to kill him, hired by Jovenel. And nobody followed up on that.
Yes.
No, they acted like this. They just didn't say that.
As a matter of fact, they weren't even, were they arrested? They weren't even tried. I mean, they were let go.
Haitians arrested them, but Michel Sisson, the U.S. ambassador, went to the prison, got them out, flew them to Miami, and nobody knows. They've never faced justice. Right? There were two. We have no idea what they were doing, but we know that they had drones. They had tons and tons of weapons in their car. There was two theories that came out. I mean, we have our own, but who cares about what we say? But what they said about themselves. So the Prime Minister, Henri Seillant, who had been fired by Jovenel, essentially said that Jovenel had hired mercenaries to come and kill him. One of Jovenel's legal advisor, an attorney, I think his last name is George, he said that they were not hired by Jovenel to do what Seillant is saying. He said that they had come on their own to steal money, of the Petro-Caribe money that had been frozen in the bank. And nobody ever found out what they came to do, right? Because the international community can do what the hell they want to do. And we know that they use these military, very shady men with past. The United States works, and the CIA works with people that they have dossiers on. And they bring them to do their dirty work. You know, at that time, I had gone through who these mercenaries were and some of their criminal activities that was readily available on the internet. But anyways, so we say today, we at Free Haiti, that if the U.S. ambassador had allowed Haitian justice to work with regards to finding out what these mercenaries were doing in Haiti, maybe today there wouldn't have been mercenaries coming in to kill Jovenel. Right. Thinking that they can just get away with it.
Exactly. No.
Okay.
To what extent?
All right. That's basically it. The other two, very quickly, is the head of the Haitian police. His name is Leon Charles, a international community trained person. Where was he doing all of this? Right today, he's the guy that's up front telling us he's arresting these Colombians, and then of course the head of the Presidential Guard. Where was he? His name is Dimitri Harold, another U.S. trained agent.
Mm-hmm.
So those are people we have questions for, and if there was law running in IAT, we would ask them, they should be investigated.
And one of the things that you have pointed out,
they're the ones arresting these Colombians, which who may be scapegoats, right? Because these Colombians were asked to come by these policemen into IAT.
Mm-hmm. Let me take a quick break, sis. One quick break, and I'll come right back. Now, my sister, here's the thing. We have just about 13 or 12 minutes to go, and I know we've got a lot to put in there. One is that we want to talk about Moise himself and the decrees and how he ruled and some of those decrees that he put in place. And I wanted to look quickly at the oligarchs, but also that day, one of the things you talked about is that the United States has the fourth largest embassy for the United States is in the small island of Haiti. And how come they did not know, their intelligence did not tell them that there was going to be this operation when it appeared so sloppy? So let us start with we can actually start there, but no, let's start with the decree and who Moise, how he ruled as a president by decree in Haiti and some of those decrees.
All right. So quickly. All right. So some of the decrees that were number one, this is very erotic. Mm-hmm. He decreed and created a spy agency, a secret intelligence agency. Mm-hmm. Where were they? Mm-hmm. And I want to know. He should get his money back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first thing.
Yes.
And then essentially that secret spy agency was going after Haitian human rights people. Mm-hmm. One of our and I want to say her name. We were reeling from the death of Antoinette. She was her name is Antoinette Duclair. She was shot in the head by unknown assailants on June 29th.
We say her
name.
Your
folks should understand that we have been destroyed. Jovenel Moise have been killing. He did everything. He fired Supreme Court justices so that there would be no transitional government and he could stay in power. He he actually put in jail one Supreme Court justice and said that there was going to be a coup d'état against him. Mm-hmm. There's a very well known the head of the Port-au-Prince bar, Doval, just got shot, and they found the telephone of Jovenel's driver on this in the house. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of things, all kinds of Haitians have died behind this man that the international community kept in power over our heads.
And he legalized pedophilia. And this is something that our listeners should...
Decree.
Yes.
By decree. Mm-hmm. By decree, Jovenel brought down the age of consent and thinking that this is the most important thing for poor, starving Haitian children. Mm-hmm. He made pedophilia legal by decree. Mm-hmm. And we don't even understand where that came from. Mm-hmm. Also, he hired gang members to go after protesters, and he had affiliated the gangs. Mm-hmm. And within the last, let's say, 3 months, they have burnt down the houses of poor people, especially in neighborhoods that were protesting against Jovenel.
So, in essence, he brought back the Tonton Macoute. He brought back the Tonton Macoute.
That's right, right? And the figures are between 12,000 to 16,000 people in the last 2-3 months have been burnt out of their houses. Where was the denunciation of the international community? Okay? He hired white mercenaries to come in and shoot the Haitian people in the head while they were protesting. Where was the international community? He had, supposedly, on the outside of his house was his presidential guards protecting him. On the inside of his house were these Blackwater white mercenaries that he had hired. Where were they that night? I want to give you guys one anecdote. In 2004, when the United States did a coup d'état against President Aristide, President Aristide too had these white security guards, and I remember interviewing one of them after the coup d'etat had happened, I said, "Where were you?" He said that they were told by the U.S. to stand down, and threatened that if they did not stand down, then their what do you call that? Their retirement fund will be in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. So who knows what happened? Because they're former military, so the United States could do whatever they want. Where was the private guards hired by Jovenel Moise, right? Mm-hmm. He also, like I said, he fired 3 Supreme Court justices. He made illegal basic protests. He made them like terror, like Haitians. They don't have any guns except the criminals have guns. So they might throw a rock. Mm-hmm. They might burn a tire. He made those things acts of terror.
And this is a president we're talking about who was assassinated, Jovenel Moise. And this is one of the reasons why we said we come to investigate him, not to praise him. But at the same time, in spite of everything, here we have an assassination in CARICOM waters. A member of CARICOM assassinated. Where is CARICOM? We're going to speak with the Barbados ambassador to CARICOM at 9 o'clock this morning, and we will ask some of those questions. Another question I'm asking, sis, is Israel. Israel has been tapped here in Jamaica for security development and so on, and I know Jamaica is in some kind of agreement with Israel for security. But one thing we know that Haiti also is seriously dependent on Israel for security. And nothing passes by Israel. Mossad. How is Mossad involved in this from your perspective, if any?
All right. So one of the most powerful and richest oligarchs in the Caribbean, his name is Bijou. And he is the ambassador, the ambassador. His family have been in Haiti for about 100 years. They've been around, right? They came in, and these guys came in with nothing, and now they are the most powerful. They control the ports. They privatize the ports. He has a Port Lafiteau. Mm-hmm. They were fighting in 2004, these oligarchs amongst themselves, and they have a reputation of hiring gangs and so on. But this guy now only hires Mossad, former military. There's no way that he would have had to give also the go ahead. Now, Bijou, and I say this because you can readily see that the gangs in IAC, the weapons that they use are Galils and other weapons that are made in Israel. Mm. We don't control the ports. Mm-mm. These are the people that control the ports that bring in these weapons. Mm-hmm. Okay,
it's a lesson for Jamaica. It's a lesson for Jamaica. It's a lesson. Remember what you're saying, sis. It's a lesson for Jamaica. I just want to say that because we are putting all our eggs in one basket with Israel right now, and I'm just saying, and I'm leaving it right there. Go ahead, my sister.
Exactly. So, when Matuli was in office, one of the things he did was give a contract. Mm-hmm. Without any Haitian, any of us, being part of this, but he gave a contract for securing Haiti's borders to a Mossad organization made up former Israeli lieutenant, Israeli military. So where were they on the night of July 7th? They have a contract to secure Haiti's borders, land, air, and sea. Mm-hmm. Right? So if a plane had landed, or if there was a caravan of 5 to 9 cars of fully armed people going up a mountain to the president's residence, where was these people?
That is the question. And the answer, as usual, is right there in the question. My sister, I'm so sorry, out of time, But here is the situation. At the end of the day, putting on your legal, your activist, your Aishan hats, how would you encapsulate, in just a paragraph or so, what has happened here in IT? Who are the major players? You name them out one by one. But how would you then now bring all of that together to say, here we are looking at Colombians who might have come through the Dominican Republic, but appearances to the mind are of 4 kinds. How would you put that together?
Well, let's say the Colombians that they're arresting were the triggermen. Who hired them? That's the question. I know that the United States have so-called said that they've sent FBI and Homeland Security authorities to go help Haiti investigate. But who is investigating? The very people benefiting from the crime. So, listen, and this is what I say to my people. This is what I say to the soldiers on the ground that I know are going to continue to fight. Honestly, let these men fight it out. Let them kill each other. We don't have a horse in this race. What is the United States? What do they want? They want another selection, right? And Biden has come out and said essentially that nothing has changed. There will be elections in Haiti. And September for the legislature, and in December for a president. And they said, essentially, this is why they were keeping Jovenel Moise, because they wanted him in office. We were asking for a transitional government with the head of the Supreme, with, you know, the Haitian opposition had chosen members of the Supreme Court to head a transition since this man's term was over. The international community wouldn't allow it. We're still saying the only person that could do a transitional government is the Supreme Court justice, and we don't recognize the firing of that Jovenel Moise has done of these people that he can't fire, just like he could not change the penal code via decree and make pedophilia illegal. All the stuff that he's doing, we don't recognize. The people of Haiti don't recognize. But we don't run IET. The international community does.
Exactly.
Ellen Malou just said, who's our president. So for me, the international community are going to do what they're going to do. They always do what they're going to do. And the CARICOM is going to rubber stamp it. They're going to say, we want the Haitians to go to elections. They don't care if they're with drug dealers. And that's so all of them, as far as we're concerned, the whole international community, from CARICOM to OAS to the UN to the EU, are responsible for what's going on in IET today.
Thank you so much,
Their day is coming.
Thank you so much, my sister. Quickly, one name. One name. Who do you see a person quickly who could do this? One name who could step in.
There is a Supreme Court justice. Her name is Madame Koch. She should head a transitional government.
Thank you, my sister.
Some people with absolutely no dossiers that are moral and non-corrupt.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.